Hi everybody, this is Anne. If you look up the definition of the word mug, you'll find it's considered to be a large cup with a handle. It sounds so simple, but if you're a potter, that basic definition is only the beginning of designing your mugs. The amount of choices for the mug body shape are endless. Then when you do land on a form and size, you have to make the same decisions for the handle. In this video, I'm going to show you 8 pulled and sculpted handle ideas to give your mug uniqueness and personality. I thought it would be good to start this list by creating a simple pulled handle. To do this, I started with a thick coil of clay that's not too soft. I rolled the coil on one of the edges to thin it down into a carrot shape. For those who aren't confident about rolling, you can also lay this on a table and use your fingers to pull the clay downward, turning the coil with each pass to get that carrot shape. For the pulling, I held the coil vertically with one hand. I wet the opposite hand, then placed the bottom section of the coil between the flat part of my thumb and the cradle of the rest of my fingers. I gently pinched the clay with my thumb and worked my way down to the tail end. I repeated these steps until the coil became thin and a bit wider than my thumb. After pulling, if I'm left with a thick weighty knob of clay at the end of the carrot, I usually just pinch it off so it doesn't stretch the handle downward more than I want. I gently continued working the clay until I had a nice long thin blank of clay that I simply broke off from the rest of the coil. To attach it to the body of the mug, I cut the end of the handle so it left me with a nice flat edge. I flattened that a bit more to widen it out for a good connection point. I scored the body in preparation for the attachment. I usually try and place the handle well under the rim so the weight of it won't pull the rim out of alignment and warp it. I scored the handle edge. I then slipped it. I gently pushed the two parts together, making sure I didn't squeeze too hard and distort the shape of the handle or the body. I continued working that edge tight to the body so the joint wouldn't separate as it dried. I cut the bottom of the handle at an angle, long enough so that when it was bent, I created a D shape. Again, I scored and slipped the bottom section and worked that to the body as well. I like to press the bottom section of the handle down with my finger so it butts up flat against the body. I used my wet thumbs to clean up the raw edge along the very bottom and to give that flat part a bit of a sculpted look. I continued to make sure the handle was vertically straight, then gave it that classic D shape while rounding the edges. I made sure both connection points were tight by using a wet paintbrush around them. Now let's add a little pizzazz to that basic handle by using simple ornamentation. Starting with a small coil, I placed it under the top joint of the handle and cut away the excess clay. So you can see my finger movements, I'll do this part on the table. I use my fingers to flatten down one side of the coil. Now the coil should take the shape of the joint. I keep working that top edge flush with the handle so it looks seamless. I then made the choice to sculpt out the sides to give the illusion that part of the handle end curled downward. At this point in the drawing, I softened the area with a paintbrush, but when it was leather hard, I was able to give it more definition and shape. To counterbalance that bottom coil, I rolled another small coil for the top. I pinched off the bottom and made it into an oval shape, which I then attached at the top and worked the end downward with my fingers so it was seamless. Now when you look at it from the side, just those little touches add a bit of an Art Deco feel to the mug. Let's see what happens when we extend that ornamentation all the way down the handle. I again pulled a very long handle, working the bottom section very thin, then cut the handle into two parts. I rounded the bottom of the thinner handle blank with my fingers. I then attached that to the handle so the bottom handle blank extended out from underneath. Knowing what length that I wanted the handle to be, I made a straight cut along the top. I attached the top to the body of the mug, then you can see how that curls down onto the mug for this neat look. Now on this mug I positioned the overlaying handle facing outward, but I could also invert this design so the overlay was underneath the main handle. You can also see that I added a little flattened coil at the top. Instead of altering the handle, this time let's alter the mug body by cutting a dart out of it when it's leather hard. I made a cut down the center, then made two more cuts on either side for a football shape. I have a whole video dedicated just to darting. Check out the link above. I scored and slipped the area, then pushed the walls together to create a divot in the clay. I worked a small coil into the inside of the wall to prevent cracking and reshape the rim. Using a basic pulled handle blank, I notched the top to match the new contour along the body. I did the same thing to the bottom of the handle. The new handle just curls around that divot to form a nice circular shape and accent the altered contour of the mug body. Now let's play around with the ornamentation at both ends of the handle. Again, starting with the handle blank, I cut two sections of the bottom off. These become the lug ends at the top and the bottom of the handle. I set up my laser to make sure I attach these straight. I attached the top lug and pinched it so it tapered downward. I did the same thing with the other lug, but pinched it so it tapers upward. I then cut the handle to fit between the two lugs with enough room for a nice one-fingered space. I made the cuts to the blank at an angle on each side so they curled inward. I attached both ends along the tapered part of each lug. I made sure to create the illusion that the lugs were a seamless design with the handle. And here's what I came up with. Jim says it looks like a Greek letter omega. Maybe I should paint the mythological Greek phoenix bird on this. That would be cool. Now what happens if we shift the focus from the ends of the handle to altering the center of the handle? Again, starting with the handle blank, I rounded the bottom edge and cut about 1 inch to 1.5 inches off the bottom. I rounded that cut edge and curled it around my finger. I placed it along the bottom section of the mug to create the first part of the handle. I scored it really well, then attached it. I worked the sides down for a nice sculpted look. I rounded and softened the top edge of the blank and placed it so it was curled around. I cut the bottom so it was the size I needed for 1 or 2 fingers to fit inside. I beveled the top edge and attached it along the top part of the body. I softened the bottom edge and attached that to the flat angled section of the lug. Here's one that I made earlier. You can see that I even added a little coil at the very top to add another level of interest. Instead of attaching the handle at the ends, let's attach it from the bottom side. Again, I sliced 2 sections from my handle blank. I cut them down to the same size, about 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch long. I attached the bottom lug so it stuck out from the mug. I sculpted the sides with my fingers and made sure the attachment was firm. I used my laser when I attached the top lug to make sure the 2 lugs were vertically straight. I cut a long handle strip to size and attached it to the lugs from the bottom side. Here's one I made earlier where I intentionally curved the handle in the center to echo the rounded shape of the body. It's a bit of a primitive look, although you still have the intentionality of the softened and sculpted edges. Finally, let's change things up and attach a bulkier basket-style handle. Although the handle looks very thick and heavy, it's hollowed out to alleviate the weight, plus it helps it to dry evenly. I'll show you how to do it. I started by shaping the handle. I rolled a thick coil of slightly stiff clay and cut down the sides. I began to roll and pinch down both sides of the handle. I then used my fingers to curl the clay into a half-moon shape. I found this roll of painter's tape with the perfect rounded shape that I needed. I wrapped it with plastic wrap, then formed the handle around the outer surface. I continued working it with my fingers until I had the shape I wanted. To hollow it out, I cut the handle down the middle using my needle tool. I laid both sides flat on the table, then scooped out the clay from the interior of both sides. I was careful not to go too deep or too close to the sides. I scored and slipped both sides, then reattached them, working the seams tightly together. It's safest to pierce a hole into the hollow cavity to allow air to escape before firing. I placed it back on the tape roll to reshape it. I attached the handle to the indented edge of my thrown and tapered cylinder. Here's what I came out with. The flared out handle extends the cylinder line upward, so it's no longer just a pyramidal shape, but now it has an hourglass form, and I love that shape. I challenge you to think beyond the basics and get more creative with your handles. The possibilities are endless. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.